Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's Monday night Chassidus Shir, learning the Maimorim from the Alter Rebbe on Torah of the weekly Parsha. So this week, the Parsha of the Shavua is Parshas Tetzaveh. However, we're not going to be learning a Maimer from Parshas Tetzaveh. Instead, we are going to be learning a Maimer which the Alter Rebbe prints at the end of Parshas Tetzaveh, and that is on Parshas Zachar. In most years, Parsha Zachar falls out during the week of Parsha Tetzaveh. This year, because of the unique Kvius that Purim falls out on Friday, instead Parsha Zachar coincided with Parsha Truma. But nonetheless, Parsha Zachar is always read before Purim because Purim is very much connected to Zachar. Zachar is the mitzvah of remembering what Amalek did to us when he attacked the Jewish people on their way out of Mitzrayim. And Haman was a descendant of Amalek trying to do the same thing to the Jewish people. We know that all the mitzvahs of the Torah are eternal, which means that they apply in every single generation, in all times and at all places. And even when a mitzvah cannot be performed in its literal physical sense, nonetheless, it can be observed in a spiritual, mystical sense in our own inner avodas Hashem. And so it is with the mitzvah of Amalek. In fact, there are three mitzvahs. There is a mitzvah to destroy the nation of Amalek. There is a mitzvah to remember what Amalek did to us. And the third mitzvah is not to forget what Amalek did to us. And whilst we can no longer fulfill these mitzvahs because, we can remember what Amalek did, but we cannot fulfill the mitzvah of eradicating Amalek because we no longer know who the descendants of Amalek are. Nonetheless, Chassidus explains that there is the inner Amalek. There is the Amalek inside each one of us, and that represents a spiritual battle that we need to fight. And Chassidus gives us an insight as to what this inner Amalek is, how it operates, what it tries to do, and more importantly, how do we stand up against it? When are we vulnerable? And when are we able to overcome it? So I'll bring up the text of the Maimer on the screen. Again, it's a lengthier Maimer, and hopefully we'll get through as much of it as possible. If needs be, we will skip a few sections of the Maimer to go ahead. So the Maimer begins, it's on the Pasuk, Zachar es asher asalacha Amalek. The Pasuk which comes from the Kriya of Parsha Zachar. Remember what Amalek did to you, Baderech, when you were on the way. In Eksiv, it says in the pasuk Melchama LaHashem ba'Amalek midor dor. Now that pasuk, in fact, comes from Parshas Beshalach, which was the first time Amalek attacked the Jewish people, and it says that there is a war of Hashem against Amalek midor dor, from generation to generation, and that means in all generations. She'ein Hashem shalem ve'ein akisei shalem ad sheyimcha zara shel Amalek. That same parsha in Beshalach says, "Vayomer Hashem ki yad al case yudke milchama Hashem b'Amalek." Hashem says, "Ki yad, my hand, is al case, is on the throne." Yudke, which is Hashem's name, that there is a war of Hashem against Amalek in all generations. And the commentaries, the Medrash points out that in this verse, the word kisei, which means a throne, is not spelt in its full form. Instead, it is spelt case, kaf, samach, missing the aleph. And the divine name Yud-K Vav-K in this instance appears only as Yud-K, prompting the Medrash to say that Hashem's name will not be complete and his throne will not be complete until the descendants, the seed of Amalek, has been destroyed. And we need to know what that means. What does it mean that until Amalek is destroyed, Hashem's name and his throne will not be complete? Says the Alter Rebbe that this war against Amalek takes place in every generation, in the soul of the Jewish people, meaning that the mitzvah cannot be fulfilled in every generation in the literal sense, but the battle still takes place on the inner level inside the soul of every single Jew. The Mishnah tells us, and we read this in the Haggadah of Pesach, that in every single generation, we must see ourselves as if we have personally gone out of Mitzrayim, gone out of Egypt. And the Alter Rebbe adds here, as he does in Tanya, that this obligation of seeing ourselves as going out of Mitzrayim is not only every generation, but b'chol yom v'yom. Every single day, we must spiritually leave our Mitzrayim. And that is why in the Shema we say the third passage of Vayomer, where we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim both in the day and in the night, to remind us that this is something that we must be engaging in every single day. Every single day, the Jewish person on the level of their soul needs to go through the exodus from Egypt, as we'll explain what that means. Immediately after the Jewish people left Egypt, Before they reached Har Sinai to receive the Torah, that is when Amalek first attacked the Jewish people. And just that is true in the literal sense, in the literal leaving of Egypt, that they were confronted, as they left Egypt, they were confronted by Amalek. So too in the spiritual sense, when we do the avodah of leaving our Mitzrayim every single day, we also fight a battle against Amalek. We are attacked by Amalek and have to fight against him every single day as well. Indeed, just as we are obligated to remember the Exodus every day, we are obligated to remember what Amalek did to us every single day. As it says, he attacked you, what he did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt. And it says, it says in the book of Shmuel that know what Amalek did to you when you were on your way of going out of Egypt. So too in a spiritual sense, Amalek attacked us when we are leaving our spiritual Egypt. And to understand this a little bit deeper and what these levels mean within the soul, the Alter Rebbe now continues. Ubir inyan zeh hine knesses Yisrael shemekor kol neshamas Yisrael nikra b'shem libi. There is a Kabbalistic level called Knesset Yisrael. Knesset Yisrael means literally the gathering or the collective of the Jewish people, but in fact it refers to the source above of the neshamas of the Jewish people. And the neshamas, the source of the neshamas of the Jewish people is called Libi. Hashem refers to the Jewish people as my heart. As it says in the Pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Libavtani achoisi kala, you have won my heart, my sister, the bride. Why is the Jewish people, why is the collective of our souls likened to the heart? The heart is the residing place and the keli to receive the spirit of life from the soul. The primary keli to receive that spirit of life is in the heart. And from the heart, it becomes filled up with that vitality, and then it is spread to the rest of the body. Just like the heart spreads the blood, which carries oxygen and nutrients to the rest of the body, so too the vitality of the soul, hadam hu nefesh, is collected in the heart and then spreads from the heart to the rest of the body. And through and in the heart, that is what causes the circulation of the vitality of the soul throughout the body. So it says in the Pasuk in Yechezkel that the Chayos, the divine angels, were in a state of Ratzoi v'shoif, Ratzoi running and returning, running and returning. And that represents the pulsing of the heart, where the heart receives and then the heart gives out the blood. And that contains within it the life source of the body. And that's a metaphor. And so too, when we talk about the source of the collective source of the Jewish soul, Knesset Yisrael, we are called Knesset Yisrael, which means to collect, al shem hakibutz v'aknisa, because we too, the souls of the Jewish people, are kalim, to receive and contain. Shemiskabetz umisasep losoicha ikr hachayus v'ashpa mevchinas Yisrael de la'ela, b'chinas tisarisa im elokim. The Jewish souls, we are the mamutza, we are the agents which bring godly revelation and light to the world. And that is why the souls of the Jewish people in the collective sense above is called Knesset Yisrael, because we receive from the level of Yisrael. Yisrael is one of the names which was given to Yaakov after he wrestled with the angel. And the Pasuk says, Ki sarisa im Elokim, because you have prevailed over Elokim. We know that in Chassidus, the two divine names, Havai and Elikim, represent two different states of godly revelation. Elikim is the contracted and limited godly light that comes down into the worlds, into Seder Ishtalshalos, and therefore is limited to the levels of the worlds. However, Havaya, Yudke, Vavke, which is made up of the words Haya, Hoive, V'yeh, Ke'echad, past, present, and future, all at once, represents godliness that is infinitely beyond the worlds. The essence of the Or Ein Sof, or the Or which is Soiv Kol Almin, encompasses the worlds. And that is the level of Yisrael, because Yisrael is that you've prevailed over Elokim. The level of Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is above Elokim. It's the godliness beyond the worlds. And that is the image of man on the divine throne. And Knesset Yisrael, we are the receivers of that godly light, which is beyond the worlds, and we are the ones who function as the conduit to bring that revelation into the world, just like the heart brings the vitality of the soul to the rest of the limbs of the body as well. So that is true in the collective sense. And now we get to the individual levels of each neshama. He nekudus halev mamish. What is this Knesset Yisrael aspect? What is the leiv dimension within each soul? That refers to the nekudus halev, to what is called the point of the heart itself, which is the essence of the soul. Every single Jewish person, irrespective of their level of observance of Torah and mitzvahs or their knowledge of Torah and mitzvahs, every single Jewish person has a core of their neshama, and the nature of that neshama is like a flame that wants to flicker upwards to cleave to Hashem. This is the essence of the soul. Umahusa, and the essence of the soul, and this is the level of the soul which the Alter Rebbe describes in Tanya as being the part of God actually. It's the spark of God within the neshama. That is the essence of every Jewish soul, and all it desires is connection to Hashem. Its sole desire and yearning is libato v'likalo ba'or havaya, is to become batal and subsumed within the light of Hashem. But then we have lower levels of the soul. The lower levels of the soul are the consciousness of the soul, known as the koiches. And those are our faculties of intellect and emotion. The intellect, chachma, bin, and das, through which we are able to understand and meditate on godly concepts, and our emotions, which are our feelings of love and awe of Hashem. But that is not the essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is that powerful yearning and desire that the soul has to cleave to Hashem, and from that, like the life force of the heart goes to the rest of the body, so too that spark of godliness within the soul goes out to the koiches of the body, the koiches of the soul, the intellect and the emotions. Until it goes not only to influence our intellect and emotions of the godly soul, but it also spreads to the levushim, the garments of the soul, being our thought, speech, and action. Our thought, speech, and action are called garments because just like the garments are not part of the person themselves, there's something separate that can be put on and taken off. So too, the soul itself is defined by the essence and by the intellect and the emotions. And relative to that, our thoughts, the thoughts that we occupy our minds with, our speech and our actions, they are garments to express the inner desires of the soul. And when the inner desires of the soul are channeled into our thought, speech, and action, that is the fulfillment of the mitzvahs which are fulfilled either in thought, such as the study of Torah, speech, such as words of prayer, and maisa, the active mitzvahs. The gam, not only does the influence of the essential core of the soul influence the intellect and emotion of the godly soul, and the garments of the godly soul, but it even influences that affects also that when we are in sync, then the intellect and the emotions of the godly soul are enclosed within the animalistic soul, the intellect and emotions of the animalistic soul, which is the side of us which craves worldliness, materialism, selfishness, etc., to be affected by the light of the neshama. As we said before, this essential core, that spark of godliness within every soul, which desires only connection to Hashem, even though that is equal in every single individual, but it is not revealed equally within everyone. We all have it within us, but some of us it is hidden, some of it's hidden deeper, some of us it is more revealed. Koloimer afilu ba'achas me'eze b'chinis hamizgalas b'chol nefesh ki muchrach hu liyos eze gili ha'ara b'chol nafshoi v'gili zeh hu mishoyrish ha'nefesh hi b'chinis lei. Every single one of us, even if this level of the core of the neshama is not always revealed, there will be moments and times where it is revealed. As it says in the pasuk, you have captured my heart with one of your eyes. That means even with only one eye, so to speak, with one expression, with one revelation in one action of that core of the soul, every single person from time to time will have the revelation of this essence of the soul, and that is coming from the level of the leiv, the heart within us, and that's why the idea of the leiv, the heart, is the metaphor for this level of the soul which grasps Hashem. So that's understanding what is the godliness within inside of us that desires only, and when that is activated, we will desire only connection to Hashem and have no desires for anything else, not worldly pleasures, not spiritual pleasures, only connection to Hashem. That obviously is a state of redemption. So what is Galus? In paragraph 7, V'ine inyan Galus Mitzrayim u'shahaya az gilui b'chines nekudas halev b'Galus. Galus Mitzrayim comes from the word meitzarim ukvulim, limitations and restrictions, is because a state of Galus is when the spark of the soul, the essential core of the neshama which desires only Hashem, is in a state of concealment. It's not revealed and accessed. She b'chines katnos, and it therefore manifests in a state of katnos, which means literally smallness. B'chines emuna levada, only on the level of emuna. When Moshe came to the Jewish people and he said that Hashem came to me at the burning bush and said that I've come to take you out of Egypt, the pasuk says, "V'ya'amin ha'am." The people responded; they believed, they had emuna in Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, emuna is a very, very powerful thing, but emuna in this sense represents a very juvenile, lowly state in our avodas Hashem. A far deeper level of connection to Hashem is when our intellect, our mind is engaged, and we have a deep understanding and appreciation and feeling for godliness. But emunah is not that. Emunah means we don't understand, we don't have any concept, but we are mamin, we believe, we defer, we surrender ourselves to godliness. And that is a state of smallness. That soul, that spark of the soul, is being expressed in the most basic level, which is only emunah, which is, we're going to see, emunah does not necessarily change a person or impact person in a lasting, inner, and meaningful way. But after being in Mitzrayim, the pasuk says, "Ele eschem ma'ani Mitzrayim." Hashem says, "I will take you up. I will bring you up from this poverty, from this suffering of Egypt, El Eretz Tova Urachava." That the destination is to go to Eretz Yisrael, which is described in the Torah as a good and expansive land. Shi'archavas hadas. What does that represent spiritually? So if Mitzrayim represents the absence or lack of godly awareness and understanding, and we're limited to that level of emunah, the expansive land represents a state where we have a broad, deep understanding, a das in godliness. As it says, V'yidatem ki ani Hashem, that in taking us out of Egypt, the ultimate goal is v'yidatem, not only in a way of emunah, but that we should know that I am Hashem. Because when through our das, through our understanding, through our meditation and awareness of godliness, that is what causes a greater revelation of the spark of the essence of the soul. That spark in the soul should no longer remain a spark which is hidden and expressed purely in emunah, but it becomes a flame inside of our hearts, so that ultimately will influence all of those levels that we spoke about before, illuminating our intellect and emotion of the godly soul through to our thought, speech, and action, and even our animalistic soul should be permeated with the revelation of the essential core of the soul, which desires only Hashem. It's very interesting. Chassidus quotes from the Ein Yaakov that says that a ganef, before a thief, before going into the tunnel, prays to Hashem to be successful. And Chassidus brings this as a metaphor and asks the following question: what does it mean that a ganef, a thief, prays to Hashem? Either he believes in Hashem or he does not. If you believe in Hashem, then why are you stealing? And if you're stealing because you don't believe in Hashem, then why are you praying? And the answer is that really belief is there with every single Jewish person, but it is makif, it's beyond and encompassing, meaning it doesn't affect our conscious thinking and daily living. That there can be a disconnect between our emunah, which is vague and ethereal, and our thinking, our behaviors, etc., which are internal. And that happens when we're on the level of emunah alone. But when that emunah comes in a way of das, which is the idea of the expansive, broad land, then when we have deep understanding of godliness in our minds, then that filters through to affect our emotions and will affect our thought, speech, and action, that it will only be in accordance with what Hashem wants us to do without any dissonance. Our sages tell us that when we say the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, whoever extends the Echad of Shema will have an extended life. But what does this mean on a deeper level? Dahainu, laharich ulaharchid b'daitoi uvo'omek liboy, ad makom sheyad sichloi utfunose magas, eich shani avaya lo shani si mamish, k'moi koydem b'riyas ha'olam. The Shema is a declaration of Hashem's oneness. And the meditation of the Shema is supposed to be about Hashem's oneness, how Hashem is beyond existence, and Hashem is absolutely unaltered and unchanged by the creation of the world. And the idea of extending the echad, which means meditation on Hashem's oneness, means to have a broad and deep, extended understanding. That even now, when the worlds have been created, even now in the heavens above and the earth below, the pasuk says, "Ein oid," there is really nothing else besides Hashem. Because really everything is completely batal and like naught before Him. Because all of creation is only from a ray of Hashem's light, and just as a ray of light is completely insignificant in comparison to the source of light, so too all of existence, as vast as it looks in our perspective, is really like nothing in comparison to Hashem's essential being. And therefore, the more we meditate on this echad of Hashem, how everything is all one, it's all batal to godliness, that is the idea of expansive da'as, and that is what reveals the core of the neshama within us. The ilozois, and if this is so, hakol b'telim etzlo yisparach, then in truth, everything is really batal. The world that we see in front of us, and all of the desires and cravings for material and worldliness that we thought was so important, when our mind is filled with this awareness, how everything is nothing in comparison to Hashem, then everything will be batal. The elav tichsev nefesh kochai, and all we will crave and yearn for is Him. As it says, the angels cry out with a great noise. And the longer we meditate on this, what we do is we take what was only a level of emunah and it becomes a profound understanding. The more we meditate beroichav in breadth, uvoimek in depth, but with the eye of our mind, as if we see it, and in our hearts, yavin, then we'll come to a point where we have no other desire or wants in our heart other than for Hashem Himself, as expressed in the pasuk, who do I have for me in heavens, meaning the spiritual world, and with you I desire nothing else in the world, meaning the worldly desires and material desires. Will come to a point where all we crave, all we yearn for in our soul is to cleave to Hashem. And that meditation of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is how we come to the fulfillment of the mitzvah V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, to love Hashem your God. Sheyeh Elokecha b'chol levavcha. What does that mean? V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha means that what will be b'chol levavcha, what will be all inside of our hearts and our soul heart desire will be Elokecha, will be for Hashem. Pirush. That our hearts will be a keli that is filled with the revelation of godliness. That it should be revealed inside of our heart, in a fiery and passionate desire, like flaming fires. And then we'll have the strength to stand up against all obstructions, all challenges. And to, so to speak, sacrifice ourselves and to cast away all of the desires for materialism that come from our animalistic soul. And all we will crave is Hashem Himself. So Mitzrayim represents the state of contracted limitedness, where our relationship with Hashem is on the level of emunah. And on that level, the godly spark within us is hidden and concealed, and it does not wield an influence. The ultimate destination, Eretz Yisrael, which is called the broad expansive land, that represents das, a deep understanding of godliness and how the worlds are completely naught before Him. And then at that point in time, we will have no other desires, no animalistic desires, no worldly desires, no material desires, other than for Hashem Himself. And that is because the essential core of the soul will be revealed and therefore affect every other layer of our consciousness. The Zehu says the Alter Rebbe b'chinas Knesset Yisrael de la'ela. This is what it means, Knesset Yisrael above. Yisrael de la'ela, the level of Yisrael, b'chinas Havaya. That, as we said before, Yisrael is connected to the name Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is godliness beyond the world. Knesset Yisrael, referring to the collective of the Jewish soul, which receives, we receive within ourselves, which means in a way of deep understanding this level of godliness. That's b'chol levavcha. What is b'chol nafshecha, which is the next level of love and nishma? That not only does it affect our heart, that our only desire, the heart which is the seat of desire, is for Hashem, but then that flows through to the nefesh, which refers to all of our thoughts, speech, and action, that it will be completely in sync with that own single desire of the essence of the soul for Hashem. And how is that? When we fulfill mitzvahs, either on level of thought, speech, or action, when we learn Torah, our thought is being enclosed within the divine thought itself. When we speak words of Torah and words of prayer, our speech is being enclosed within the divine words of speech. And so too with our actions. As it says, that these words that Hashem says that I am speaking, I, that pronoun which refers to godliness beyond all of his names, you shall speak those words, those same words. That when the essence of the soul is revealed through this deep awareness and understanding of godliness in our mind, then our thoughts will be enclosed and expressed and articulated only in Hashem's thoughts. And our speech will be revealed and expressed only within the divine speech. Now, even though the prophet says that my thoughts are not your thoughts, and if that is true, how is it possible for our thoughts to be enclosed within God's thoughts if Hashem's thoughts are beyond and not like our thoughts? The Alter Rebbe explains that if we look at the end of that verse, it says that my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways, which means, when is it that my thoughts are not like your thoughts? When you are incapable of grasping my thoughts, that is when your ways are not my ways. Meaning, when we do not go in the ways of Hashem, when we do not fulfill Torah and mitzvahs, when that godly spark is not revealed within us, and instead we desire and crave worldliness and materialism, our ways are not Hashem ways, and then certainly our thoughts cannot be enclosed within his thoughts. But when your ways are my ways, meaning when we go through this meditation, how everything is battled and surrendered to the oneness of Hashem, that is the way of Hashem, this meditation, which is then channeled into our love of Hashem. Then then my thoughts will be enclosed within your thoughts, or your thoughts within my thoughts, and we'll be able to unite with Hashem on the level of our thought, speech, and action as well. So this is the idea of the revelation of the essential core of the soul, which the Alter Rebbe explains in the next paragraph, as we've seen, takes place primarily during davening. But the meditation during davening, specifically when we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, is to meditate on how Hashem is beyond the worlds and everything is absolutely like naught before him. And that meditation will bring us to what is referred to as Ahava Betanugim. Ahava Betanugim means a love of delight. Just as when a person is so enraptured with delight and sweetness and pleasure, godliness becomes our tainug, becomes our pleasure. This is the highest form of love, where we take delight in Hashem. The godliness and connection to Hashem becomes our pleasure. It becomes our delight. As the Zohar says on the pasuk, I've eaten my honey, that refers to Shema, because the idea of sweetness of honey, that sweetness represents the sweetness and pleasure and delight that the neshama has in godliness. That is what we experience in Shema through this meditation. The dufshi, the idea of honey, hainu mesikus v'tainug, is the idea of sweetness and pleasure. Because when the oneness of Hashem is revealed within our hearts, that there is nothing else besides Hashem, and through this meditation we come to realization that there is no other life other than connection to Hashem, and that there is no other delight or pleasure in the physical world or in the spiritual world which can compare to the pleasure and delight of connecting to Hashem. He is the source of all life and the source of all delights. When a person has this realization, and when a person experiences this delight in godliness, then His love will be to Hashem ka'adam ha'oyev eschayim mamish, to the same extent that we love our own lives. She'avazu hi ma'atzmus hanefesh. One of the deepest loves that a person has, the deepest will that a person has, is the will to live. And that will to live comes because our life is bound up with the essence of the soul. And therefore the will, the desire for life, comes from the very essence of the soul, and therefore it is the most powerful desire. And if the essence of the soul is about oneness with Hashem, it's the spark of Hashem within us, then so too, this love, this delight in Hashem, when it comes from the essence of the soul, will be a powerful desire akin to the desire that we have for life itself. So too our love of Hashem will be within our hearts. And then we'll have delight in Hashem, who is the source of all pleasures. And we'll have joy and simcha in serving Hashem, because we sense how being close to Hashem is good. And if the way to come close to Hashem is through serving Him through Torah and mitzvahs, we will do it with a joyous and glad heart. As it says, Tamru'u ki toiv Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe says, what does this level represent? It's quite an incredible level, and in general, this is the level that only tzaddikim can attain on an ongoing, lasting way. And for the rest of us, we are waiting Mashiach till we have that experience where our sole desire and delight and pleasure and sweetness is God Himself. And this is why Eretz Yisrael not only is referred to as a broad, expansive land, which represents the expansiveness of our meditation and His pointedness on godliness, but it is also called a land flowing with honey, the sweetness. The revelation of that spark from our meditation becomes revealed in our hearts with a powerful love and pleasure and delight, sweet like honey, through the broad, expansive meditation. So we now know what Mitzrayim represents, which is emunah, which is a small, limited state, which doesn't really reveal the godly spark within us, and therefore our behaviors will not necessarily be in line with that emunah. The destination is Eretz Yisrael, which is the broad, expansive land, which means broad, deep understanding of godliness that gives rise to the sweetness and honey and delight in Hashem. And on that level, we won't desire anything else other than Hashem. And if the Yetzer Hara tries to seduce us, we have no interest in worldliness. We have no interest in anything other than connection to Hashem, and we have joy in the service of Hashem. But how do we get there? Says the Alter Rebbe, how is it possible to transform instantly? And the answer is it's not possible. How can we go from a state of being in exile in Mitzrayim, which means where the godly spark of the neshama is in a very small, limited way, and it's completely hidden in the garments and the desires and the behaviors and wants of the animalistic soul, and instead, and instead of being drawn after godliness, the animalistic soul drives us and leads us after worldly, physical life and pleasures. When we're in Mitzrayim, what is our pleasure? Our pleasure is worldliness. For some it's money, for some it's fame, for some it's food, for some it's music, whatever it is. How is it possible to go from a state where we are stuck in the grips of our animalistic soul, where our source of delight and pleasure and understanding is in worldliness, to go to the opposite extreme, to have only a desire for Hashem, to the level of our desire for life itself? So the Alter Rebbe explains that is why we did not go straight from Mitzrayim into Eretz Yisrael in the literal sense, because in the spiritual sense, you cannot go straight from a state of Mitzrayim to a state of Eretz Yisrael. It says in the Pasuk in Beshalach that Hashem turned the people around and He led them through towards the derech, the way of the desert, towards the Yam Suf, towards the Red Sea. There was a closer path. They could have gone through the lands of the Plishtim and gone straight from Mitzrayim into Eretz Yisrael. But Hashem deliberately did not take them that way. Instead, they had to go through the Midbar. Uksiv, and it says concerning the desert, Lechtech acharei b'midbar, shebechinis hamidbar ubechinis acharei havaya. The Navi Yirmiyahu describes when the Jewish people left Egypt, Hashem says, Lechtech acharei b'midbar, you traveled acharai, behind me into the desert. And what is this level of the desert? The level of the desert represents a state where our relation to Hashem is in a way of acharai. What is acharai? So acharai means behind, and it comes from the term achar, meaning the back. And the Alter Rebbe explains in the next paragraph, there is, just like a person has their front and their back, so too in our relationships with Hashem, there is panim and achar. Panim comes from the word pnimius, meaning an inner, deep connection to Hashem, like when you have a face-to-face connection to someone. But achar, the back, represents a limited connection to another person. And therefore, when you turn your back on someone, it means that you are not engaging them in a deep way of connection. As it says, that when Moshe said, show me your presence, show me your glory, Hashem said, you can only see acharai, you can only see my back. And similarly, in one of the visions of the prophets, it says there was a scroll that was floating that was written on the front and the back. So in godliness, there is the idea of the front and the back. The front represents, like when you face someone, a full revelation, whereas the acharaim represents a concealment or a limited revelation. So too, just as that is in the way God turns towards us, he can either face us face to face or back to back. So too, the soul also has panim va'achar as well. What is panim? As we said, it comes from the word pnimius, the inner dimension. Panim hu b'chinis pnimius halev sheshonim miskala boy b'chinis havaya echad b'gilui mamish. What we've spoken about till now, the essential core of the Jewish soul, which desires only Hashem, that is the level of the panim. That is the level of the pnimius of the heart. That is the pnimius of the neshama. And when that is b'gilui mamish, when that's revealed, that is called panim. Shezeu chayusa v'kiyumoi. And when we reach that level, which is represented by Eretz Yisrael, the land of sweetness, the land of honey, which means we sense how godliness is everything, and our whole delight and pleasure and simcha is only in Hashem, that is the level of panim. That's Eretz Yisrael. But what is the level in the soul which is called not panim, not face to face, but rather the back? It's when this delight and life sustenance that we get from our pleasure in Hashem is not so revealed within us. And instead, Chassidus talks about two ways of serving Hashem. There is iskafia and ishapcha. Iskafia means when we don't feel it, we don't understand or appreciate it on a deep, meaningful level that we want to serve Hashem. And instead, iskafia means we have to force and compel ourselves to do what is right. Which means that I essentially would desire be doing other things, to go after worldliness and materialism. But my limited understanding compels me to force myself to do what Hashem wants me to do instead of what I want to do. But when a person is in the state of Eretz Yisrael, when their whole tainuk, their pleasure, their delight and geschmack is in serving Hashem, you no longer need to force yourself to do anything. It comes automatically because you will desire nothing else. This level of love, which brings us to iskafia, that we can force and compel ourselves to serve Hashem and to love Him, even while we still have the desires of our animalistic soul. That is a love which is asuya. It's called created love, that we create through our hispoinus as well, through understanding. That we also delve our mind and meditate on Hashem's oneness. And therefore it's appropriate to desire Him. Until such time as the inner core of the soul is revealed, this hispoinus, this meditation, will not completely be able to dominate our heart, that our heart is filled with only the desire of Hashem. Though we won't necessarily be on a state where we can say that we have no other desires than for Hashem Himself. Instead, in our heart, we still have our animalistic desires. In the left ventricle, we still have our desires for worldliness and for materialism. But the love of the godly soul, which comes through our meditation, dominates over the love of the animalistic soul, and we are able to subdue or suppress the desires of our animalistic soul, as is explained in Tanya Hamoyach Shalit al Halev, that the mind, the intellect, overrules or rules over the heart. Shalit Dafka. Shalit means to rule over against someone's will. And therefore, the understandings that we have in our mind of the greatness of Hashem through our meditations, at the level where we have not yet completely transformed our heart to desire only godliness, and we still have the desires of our animalistic soul, but the realizations of our moyach, of our mind, rule over the desires and temptations of the heart from the animalistic soul, and that is the level which is called iskafia, where we have to force and compel ourselves. We've not yet come to a state of transformation where we no longer have any other desires other than for Hashem himself. And this is the state which is represented by the desert. So the Eretz Yisrael represents where we've vanquished the desires of the animalistic soul, and we have such pleasure and delight in godliness that all we desire is godliness. But before we get there, we go through a state where we have more limited understanding, and that understanding cannot completely eradicate or reveal the essence of the soul, which eradicates the desires of the animal soul. And instead, the best that we can hope for is iskafia, of suppressing the desires of the animalistic soul. And that is why it is called acharai. Being in the desert is called going, so to speak, behind Hashem. Now, within this state that the desert represents, there are many gradations, there are many levels. You can have a person who they genuinely want. They are able to arouse the love inside of their heart so that they really genuinely want to strip themselves away from the desires of the animalistic soul, and instead desire that our whole heart should be directed to service of Hashem, and all of our thought, speech, and action should be in what Hashem wants. But nonetheless, we can't completely strip ourselves away from our animalistic selves. We don't truly despise that which is material or worldly or negative. And this is what we would probably call the Beinani. That the Beinani still has an animalistic soul, still has desires for worldliness, but his meditations and realizations and love of the godly soul is able to, so to speak, put the desires of the animal soul to sleep, and that they become batul etzloi. And then we are serving Hashem b'yetzer hatoiv ba'ava tivish shebeshar shebenafshnei u'b'yetzer hara liskafi sitracha. The godly soul then serves Hashem because of its natural desire, and the animalistic soul does not interfere because it is under the dominance of the godly soul. But the darkness of the animalistic soul's desires has not been eradicated, has not been transformed. Which means that we can't say we have only one heart, only one desire for Hashem. We can have other desires as well, but yet not to act upon them. And that is Eretz Yisrael. That is the desert, where, so to speak, our service of Hashem has to come with the level of iskafia, where we have to compel and force ourselves without having fully vanquished the desires of our animalistic soul itself. We'll skip the next paragraph, and he explains as follows. In paragraph 28, this is the path a person should choose for themselves, to meditate with our minds on Hashem's oneness, and whatever we're capable of doing. And through this, we'll be able to suppress our heart, so to speak, to compel ourselves to serve Hashem, to love Hashem, and to stand up to any forces which oppose us serving Hashem, to break our desires for worldliness, and through our mind to be able to control and harness the desires of the animalistic soul in a way of iskafia sitra achra. And then when we do that, when we go through this desert, ultimately we'll ultimately then come to the higher level where our meditations and understandings reveals the essence of the soul, and then we'll have the full transformation that we'll only have one desire for Hashem himself and no desires for worldliness at all. And then we will come from the acharayim to the pnimis, which basically means in Mitzrayim there was no connection to Hashem in a level of das and understanding at all. It was pure emunah, which is makif, which is beyond. In the desert, that represents the beginnings of connecting to Hashem in a way of understanding. And at that point, the understanding cannot vanquish the desires of the animal soul. It can merely be in a way of iskafia, where we have to force ourselves to serve Hashem and suppress the desires of our animalistic soul, which is the avoid of the Beinim. And then ultimately through that, we will come to the revelation of the essence of the soul, which is the pnimius, which is representative of the broad, expansive, and land flowing with milk and honey of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. This level of Achorayim, where our understanding enables us to force ourselves to serve Hashem and push away the desires of the animalistic soul. In number 30, the Alter Rebbe says, "V'hinei ol zeh," it's called an oil. Kabbalah's oil malchus shamayim. It's called a yoke. Who Kabbalah's midas malchus yisparach malchus shamayim, where we accept upon ourselves Hashem's kingship, meaning we surrender ourselves to do what Hashem wants and not to do what we want ourselves. Okay, let's jump down now because time is getting away from us and we haven't yet got to Amalek, and we're now going to go to 32. V'hinei. Ayidei kol zeh, through this, Nase Hashem Shalom v'Akisei Shalom. When we go through this avodah, first in a way of Achorayim, where our meditations enable us to have the strength to push away the desires of the animalistic soul. And that when we do that, ultimately we will come to the Pnimius, which is the broad, expansive land of deep passion and desire and pleasure and godliness. That is when Hashem's name is complete and when Hashem's throne is complete. The name that we refer to over here is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. Tahainu. In the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's divided into two parts. There's the upper two letters of Yud and Hey, and the lower two letters of Vav and Hey. Yud Kei, the Yud and the Hey of Hashem's name, that represents godliness beyond Seder Ishtasus, beyond the worlds. V'nikra Alma Diskas, it is called the hidden world. Chakim v'lo b'chachma Yediyah Mevin v'lo Chulu, the spheres of Chachma and Bina. Whereas the Vav and Hey of Hashem's name, that is called the revealed worlds. The Vav, as its form shows, is Hamshacha, to bring down, Leos Hey, to give rise to the final Hey of Hashem's name, which is the revealed worlds, which is the created worlds of Seder Ishtalshalos. In the exhibit says, I fill, says Hashem, the heavens and the earth, Ne'um Hashem, the word of Hashem. That level of godliness which fills the heavens and the earth is only the level of the word of Hashem, and that is the level of Malchus. Who is the one who brings down godliness into the world? It is us. Through an Isrusa de Lasata, an awakening from below, we cause Hashem, so to speak the words of creation. When we engage in this avodah, his pointers and meditation, to reveal the light of Hashem inside of our hearts, to come to a level where we desire Hashem alone, then initially it starts off in a way where we have to force ourselves. The mind overrides and rules over the desires of the animalistic soul. And then, then our understandings are able to reveal the essence of the soul. That level where our whole desire and love is only for Hashem himself, to the level of his hapcha. And when we do this, this is the awakening from below. Then we bring down the revelation of godliness beyond the world, the Yud and the Hey of Hashem's name. That instead of being the hidden worlds, it comes down in a revealed way. Meaning, when we reveal the inner depths of our soul, then we are able to draw down the inner depths of godliness into a revealed way, in the worlds. Meaning that the Yud K is then drawn down to be revealed within the Vav and Hey of Hashem's name as well. And that is only once we've eradicated Amalek, because only when we are ultimately in that state where we desire only godliness and the essence of the soul is revealed, only on that level will we then be able to draw down from the levels of godliness beyond the world, the Yud and the Hey, into the Vav K, and then we have the full name of Hashem in its complete order. In the next few paragraphs, the Alter Rebbe explains what's the idea of Hashem's throne being full, the idea of being whole. The idea of a throne, a chair, is that a person sits down in the chair. When a person is standing erect, they are high, they're up above. And when you sit down, that represents a lowering or drawing down of one's presence. And so too, the idea of Hashem's throne being complete is the idea of drawing down Hashem's presence down into the world. So that is Acharayim and Panim within the Neshama. And now we come to Amalek. So in paragraph 38, the Alter Rebbe says, it says in the Pasuk that Hashem made this against that, which means whatever exists in the forces of holiness within the Neshama exists in counterpart in the forces of Klippa, the forces of negativity and concealment. Just as in the soul, there's Panim va'achar. Panim is the revelation of the essence of the soul and its only desire for Hashem. Whereas Acharayim is where we have some level of understanding, but it is only able to suppress the desires of the animalistic soul. So too, that corresponds to levels of Panim and Achar in Klippa itself. It says in the pasuk of Parshas Balak, when Bilam gives prophecy about all of the nations of the world, Reishis Goyim Amalek. He says that Amalek is the first of all nations. And what is that? We know the various spheres correspond to different parts of the body. Chesed, the right hand, the left hand, and so too with the spheres in Klippa itself. Amalek is a Klippa which is connected the oiref, the back of the neck. Nikra Amalek, and that is why he's called Amalek, which is made up of the words Am Malak. Shemalika mina oiref. Malika was one of the ways in which the bird sacrifices were slaughtered in the Beis Hamikdash, where the Kohen with his nail would sever the head from the body of the bird at the back of the neck. That is Malika. So Amalek is the nation which severs the head from the body. That's the juncture point at the neck. And that's why Amalek is the Klippa that sits at the neck. Ubira Inu, what does that mean? The Jewish people, we have a strength, we have a quality. Often you read the Torah and you think this is an insult. You are a stiff-necked people. We're so stubborn. But Chassidus explains that in fact that this is a very powerful praise of the Jewish people, which refers to this powerful desire and unyielding desire of the soul for Hashem. So Bikesh Moshe v'salachta, and that's why Moshe said to Hashem, forgive the Jewish people for the golden calf. Why? Because they are a stiff-necked people. What does that mean? If stiff-necked is a negative thing, then why does Hashem forgive? Why does Moshe say forgive them? Because they're stiff-necked. Rather, what is Moshe saying? That the Jewish people are the level of the oiref, the neck in kedusha. That even when we are in the level of acharayim, even when we don't have full revelation of godliness, even when we don't yet have that deep, profound understanding and delight in godliness, and instead we're on the level of acharayim, we still strengthen ourselves to go in that way. That we are able, with that stubbornness, to break the desires of the animalistic soul, and to stand up against all of the impulses of our Yetzer Hara, and to do so with strength. And that is called the oiref. We explained the ability to override and dominate the desires of animalistic soul is because moyach shalit alaleh, the mind rules the heart, meaning that there's an influence of the mind that comes down to the heart to control our desires. And that influence comes down via the neck. So the idea of stiff neck means is that we have that conduit. We have the ability to bring down our meditations and realizations of the mind, that it is able to rule over our hearts and ultimately be able to transform the heart to come to Pnimius as well. In paragraph 14, the Alter Rebbe explains what is the counterpart to this level of the stiff-necked, which represents a very positive thing in the Jewish people. Amalek, that is Amalek. But whereas the Jewish people, our neck represents the connection to bring down the influence of the understanding of the mind into our hearts, Amalek is about severing the neck, Malak, to sever that influence. Well, oiref hakasha shebeklipa dahainu shegam im levavoi yavin ba'avodas Hashem shekach ya'asu chulu loydai sheinu makreches liboi lekoifu la'atoisui la'ava Hashem ela afkam zoi she'oisei apuch legami. What does Amalek do when he sits at the neck? Amalek acts as a blockage, and Amalek says that even though we may understand in our mind and appreciate that it is appropriate to serve Hashem and do what Hashem wants, but not only does Amalek not allow that influence to come down, to subdue and force our hearts to serve Hashem and to love Hashem, On the contrary, he does the opposite as well. That instead, despite our understandings, despite our meditations, Amalek is the view that we don't let it influence our behaviors and we still follow the desires of our animalistic soul. And that's why it says in the pasuk that Amalek came to you, the ones who are straggling behind you. Meaning those who are on the level of Acharayim. What does that mean? So we explained before that if we're on the level of Pnimius, not Acharayim, meaning when the essence of the soul is revealed and all we desire is Hashem, and that is our delight and passion and pleasure, etc., then we are immune to Amalek. Amalek cannot attack us because in that level, we want to, we crave and genuinely desire with every facet of our being to do what Hashem wants. But we're in the level of Acharayim, the level of the desert, where Amalek attacked the Jewish people, where we don't really have that full, deep love and passion and delight in godliness. And instead, it's having to force ourselves in a way of iskafia because of our intellectual realizations. That is where Amalek is able to come and attack the Jewish people, acharecha, when we're on the level of acharayim. And that is why Amalek is referred to as chutzpah blitama, chutzpah. Why? Because the chutzpah means that we don't let our intellectual realizations actually flow through to our emotions and our behaviors. That despite knowing and being full aware of the awesomeness of Hashem, and it's the right thing to serve Hashem, Amalek with chutzpah says, no, I'm not going to allow that influence to come down. In paragraph 42, the Alter Rebbe says that is indeed exactly what Amalek did. V'kach, so too, Haya Amalek sheyada. Amalek knew, V'ra kol hanisim shenasu l'Yisrael. Amalek was fully aware of all of the miracles Hashem did for the Jewish people. He was aware of the plagues which took place in Egypt. Amalek saw and knew about the splitting of the Red Sea and that the Jewish people seemed to be invincible. And logic would say, don't start up with them. Nonetheless, he still with chutzpah went to fight against the Jewish people at a time when the rest of the people the world was afraid. But Parah was different. Parah is also a klippa, but different to Amalek. Parah said, Lo yadaiti es Hashem. Parah says, I do not know Hashem. When Moshe first came to Parah and said, Hashem said, let the Jewish people go free, Parah says, I've got no idea who this Hashem is. I don't know Havai, I don't know godliness beyond the world. And through all of the miracles which showed Hashem's greatness and shows Hashem's power over the world and over nature, Pharaoh's heart would have been humbled and surrendered, except for the fact that Hashem said that I'm going to harden Hashem Parah's heart. And that was to punish him. And so too with the other klippas, they are like Parah, which means the reason why the klippas of our animalistic emotions and our desires, etc., crave worldliness, etc., is because of ignorance. It's because the lo yodaitis Hashem, the light of Havaya, is not revealed. But when it is revealed, and when there is an appreciation and understanding of the greatness of Hashem, which even the animalistic soul can appreciate, and therefore we should serve Hashem, then the animalistic emotions can be transformed. But Amalek doesn't respond the same way. Amalek is the first of all nations. The Zareshal Amalek and his descendants, Zerah, his seeds. What does that mean? Pirush Hazriya Sholoi Shazara B'Yisrael. It means the seed that he has planted within the Jewish people themselves. That we also have this chutzpah, that even when you reveal Ani Havaya, you reveal that I'm Hashem to Amalek. Amalek says, I don't care. You can have the intellectual realizations, and it wants to flow down to our hearts and to our behaviors. Amalek cuts it off and says, I don't want to hear about it. I don't care. I'm going to do what I want to do and live my life as I desire. And we need to fight this Amalek. In every generation, because just like in every generation there is the Yetzias Mitzrayim, and we also need to go through the desert, so to speak, to go behind Hashem. So too we need to fight Amalek. But says the Alter Rebbe, during the time of Golus now, the highest levels, we've not yet reached Eretz Yisrael. We've not yet reached this expansive, deep, passionate desire for Hashem alone from the revelation of the essence of the soul. And instead, our avodah is that our intellectual realizations we're trying to push should influence and dominate the desires of our animalistic side. So now, while we are in this level of acharayim, Ksiv, it says, Machai emche es zecher Amalek. Hashem says, I, says Hashem, will erase the remembrance of Amalek. Milchama lahavaya b'Amalek. It's a war of Hashem against Amalek. Because at this point in Galus, we do not have the power ourselves to overcome and erase the clip of Amalek, which seeks to prevent the influence of our realizations affecting our heart. To arouse the essence of the heart. It's a war that Hashem fights. All we can do is try our best to meditate on Hashem's oneness, and then to ask Hashem to have rachmanus, mercy, compassion upon us. So we're asking for revelation of godliness to help us to overcome the Amalek inside of us. But as the Pasuk says, when Hashem will give you rest from the nations around you in the land, when we reach the destination, the broad expanse of good land, the land of honey and sweetness, which represents this deep, passionate delight in Hashem, which is all we crave, then the Pasuk says, you can then erase Amalek yourself, as Zecher Amalek v'lo tishkach, and you will not forget about Hashem ever again. Because when Amalek is present, we can have shikha, we can forget about Hashem from time to time. But when we are in the state of Eretz Yisrael, when the essence of the soul is revealed and we desire only Hashem with this deep, passionate delight, then there will no longer be the loitishkach, there will no longer be any shikha. Because Amalek can only latch on at the back of the neck. But when there's pnimius, when there's a revelation of the essence of the soul, then Amalek cannot be present anymore. As it says, he could only attack those who are in the level of Acharayim, which means only when the Jewish people were on the way out of Egypt, in the desert, in the way of Acharayim, could he attack them. But when we reach that destination, which is in the times of Mashiach, when the essence of the soul is revealed, and we only have one passionate desire for Hashem alone, then we will have the eradication of Amalek through our own doings, when we have the revelation of the pnimis of the neshama. So that concludes the mimer. And it's a powerful idea to think about when we come to Purim, because Purim is, of course, about the war against Amalek of Haman. And whilst, of course, it's a day of celebration and fun and joy and simcha, etc., but there is also an inner avodah to do as well. And hopefully these ideas that we've studied about give us something to think about in our own personal struggles and battles against Amalek. And be'ezras Hashem, we should all reach that destination of the Eretz of Chalav v'Dvash in the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, when we will have only one heart, only one desire, which is the essence of the soul's desire for Hashem alone. V'haisel Hashem Hamlucha, with the coming of Mashiach, b'meidu v'yameinu, amen. And then Hashem's name will be one and his throne will be one once again. Okay, that concludes the